Hello, sports fans, and welcome to Let Me Speak, the show that shares sports' biggest headlines explained, uninterrupted, and maybe a little audacious. I'm Joe Braverman, and today's topics we'll be discussing are
the notable moves made so far and the teams that made the best moves in the first week of NBA free agency. Plus, the NBA superstars who will benefit the best from their massive new contracts. And the next steps for Baker Mayfield after finally being traded from the Browns. It's episode 79 of Let Me Speak, and it starts right now. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are back coming to you on Thursday, July 7th, 2022 for the 79th episode of Let Me Speak. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in wherever you were getting this podcast. I hope everyone had a very safe and happy 4th of July. I know the weather around here was pretty good all weekend, so a lot of people got to the beach or took some, had a barbecue or whatever. Me, no, nothing to really celebrate. Just another standard week over at WEEI, tackling those overnight shifts. But obviously, everyone had a holiday weekend. And while it was a holiday weekend, the news doesn't stop, especially in the sports world. And we're just going to get right into it. No dilly-dallying, as last week's episode was right at the beginning of free agency. So there was no news. We talked a little bit about the Durant trade that had just come up as we were recording. So now we can dive into actual free agency and the moves that have reportedly gone down. No one can really sign anything until I think like this weekend or something like that. And plus, there are probably more moves to be made, as there are still a bunch of names out there on the free agency market. So let's just get right into it. And I think we got to go right back to that headliner that I just briefly mentioned, was Kevin Durant requesting that trade from the Brooklyn Nets. And it's been about a week. And obviously we're not expecting a move to come right off the bat, for a player like Kevin Durant, because let's be honest, there hasn't been a player who wanted to trade or has been on the trade market like Kevin Durant, with no disrespect to anyone else who's been out there for recent trades, like a Russell Westbrook or a Rudy Gobert or anything like that. But someone the caliber of Kevin Durant has never been on the trade market before. LeBron never asked for a trade. Michael never asked for a trade. Larry Bird, none of them. This is the biggest star to be out there on the trade market. So it makes sense what the Nets are looking for. The reports are saying that they want a, I guess, bona fide star. I forget exactly what the phrasing that they used on it, but they wanted a star, a couple of players, and a giant overhaul of picks. And it makes sense because this is a Brooklyn team that is only a few years removed from the rebuilding phase. If you remember, they just had to go through a 4-year rebuild because they wasted all their assets trying to get Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett in that trade with the Celtics. So it makes sense why they don't want to take that kind of step back. They're saying like, hey, we're in contendership. Let's stay this way. We don't want to go into another rebuild because let's be honest, they've gone I'm just trying to do it really quick off the top of my head. I think they've only been to the playoffs in the last 10 years, probably 2 or 3 times, something like that, maybe 4 times if we're being dead honest. So I get why Brooklyn wouldn't want to go into some sort of a rebuild and just say, yeah, we'll just get some players and some picks. They want to stay where they are because right now their roster is pretty, I wouldn't say, I think it's well constructed. It's probably not like a title team, but I mean, you've got hopefully Ben Simmons, who's going to come off of injury and hopefully look like the same guy. that we saw in Philadelphia. You made some moves in re-signing Nick Claxton and Patty Mills. You grabbed TJ Warren, who's a savvy veteran. Joe Harris is going to come back from injury. It's not a championship level roster, but it's still a pretty good roster considering everyone else who's out there in the Eastern Conference and what they've been able to put together. So, I mean, the trade request in itself, just looking at some of the teams that Durant put on his wish list, like the Heat and the Suns, and then other teams possibly coming in with packages like the Celtics, or everyone's talking about the Raptors possibly at the forefront. Obviously, they did it with Kawhi Leonard a few years ago, so it makes sense they'd be in the ballpark for Kevin Durant. But what's funny is everyone who's put out a trade request is basically they're either not matching what the Nets are looking for, or they're unwilling to put in any kind of package. Because when you look at, there's so many conditions, it's hard to go into like the financial or front office sort of thing of these kind of trades. But, Brooklyn doesn't want DeAndre Ayton. They want Devin Booker. And Phoenix doesn't want to do that since he signed an extension. Miami can't have Bam Adebayo, even though they probably want him, because I think something about like the rookie extension, you can't have two guys on that same thing. And then you have the Raptors, who aren't willing to part with Scotty Barnes. And Scotty Barnes has a bright future as of right now with the Toronto Raptors. So it makes sense on both sides why Brooklyn wants the overhaul and why teams are unwilling to do it, because they look at the situation that James Harden was just in and saying, oh, he could be signed to this kind of long-term deal. Kevin Durant, we have him for 4 years, but it could be, he could request another trade tomorrow, just like that. So it makes sense on both ends of the thing. It makes sense on both sides as to why they're looking for what they're looking for. And honestly, I'm hearing reports, I've listened to like Woj and Windhorst and Shams and all those guys, and they're saying there's a possibility that Brooklyn could start the year with Kevin Durant and with Kyrie Irving on the roster. And it wouldn't surprise me, but I think that's just going to be a story to watch if that happens, because let's be honest, if Kevin Durant, I don't think, the kind of person that Durant is, he's not going to have like a change of heart saying, okay, this situation might actually be pretty good. I don't expect him to have sort of that change of heart and saying, you know what, I want to stay in Brooklyn. I want to stay and I want to be committed. But, would Durant go to that sort of sabotage level of basically just like sit out, not get in shape? I don't know, but I think, it's only a week into this trade request, and we've already got, there are sometimes days where there's no news at all on the Durant trade request, but someone's going to try and make a headline out of it saying, oh, this team doesn't want to do that. This team doesn't want to do that. So I'm expecting Durant to be traded, and I think the favorite would be the Raptors, just because I think Brooklyn's going to have to settle. Just because I get why they're asking for the overhaul, but teams aren't looking for to give up that much, basically to give up their future for Durant, who might have, maybe 4 or 5 good years left, maybe more than that. Not 100% sure. He's also a little bit injury prone, as he's had a couple of leg injuries in recent years. So, to be non-committal and to basically say, this is half of our front office and half of our roster, we'll take it for this one player, it seems a little crazy to me. But I think listening to reports and looking at packages that are out there, I would say that the Raptors are the favorite to land Kevin Durant. But who knows? We're only a week into the summer and a week into the free agency tampering period. So Kevin Durant could go anywhere, and he could say anything or do anything. It's definitely something to monitor. But let's actually talk about the moves that have been made already. in free agency. Obviously, the trade that happened, shifting a little bit of power, possibly Rudy Gobert, the Stifle Tower, on his way to Minnesota from Utah, and what an overhaul that Minnesota gave up. Patrick Beverly, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, Walker Kessler, Leandro Bolmero, and 4 unprotected first-round picks. I actually think it's 5. I'm not 100% sure. But talk about Minnesota going all in on their roster. I mean, the starting lineup does look pretty good right now. You got D'Angelo Russell, Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert in that lineup. I mean, that's a good looking starting lineup right there. And initially I was kind of confused on like, okay, why are you going to play 2 7-foot centers in the same lineup? But you got to keep in mind that Towns and Gobert are 2 completely different players. So you can move Towns to the power forward. You can let him be a stretch 4. You know, you got a 7-foot guy that can shoot threes, get into the post. And meanwhile, Rudy Gobert is definitely your rim protecting center at 5 and can only really score in the paint. So it kind of makes sense. You know, does it move the needle? Am I going to put Minnesota in the category of title contenders? Probably not. I think they're right in the middle. You know, I could see them, rather than going at the 7th seed, which is what they were last year, and getting out of the play-in, probably to like a 5 or a 6, kind of basically where Utah is. I think them and Utah are probably just going to flip positions. This is a team that's really good on offense. You know, they've got a good offense, but they were lacking on defense, and Gobert definitely helps that. I mean, when you have a player that's won multiple defensive player of the years, it makes sense that you would want to get this guy. But it's going to be fascinating to see how Minnesota develops over time with having Towns and Gobert in the same lineup. You know, does Karl Anthony Towns, you know, go back to his center ways, or does he really commit to being a stretch 4? That'll be something to watch for. But I think Minnesota, you know, I like the deal. I don't love the deal. I just think they're right in the middle of the pack in that Western Conference. That's what I think. And I think they're in the middle of the pack with the Clippers, who I think made some pretty good moves. I would say, you know, so far there haven't been a lot of big moves out there. I did say that this was going to be kind of like a quiet free agency in terms of like movement or whatever. But considering what the Clippers did, not only are they getting healthy, you know, they'll have a healthy Kawhi Leonard and Paul George for hopefully a full season. Then you re-sign Nick Batum, Amir Coffey, and then you bring in John Wall, basically on a discount after getting bought out by Houston. 2 years, $13.5 million. And let's be honest, you know, again, this is not a Clippers team that I'm expecting to vault right into title contenders. You know, I still like the Warriors, who are still out there in the Western Conference. I still like Phoenix if they can get DeAndre Ayton. Memphis is obviously going to come back a little bit hungry, but I think the Clippers, again, mid-pack is right where I should put them, because John Wall, you know, this is just a guy, he's a good person, but just in terms of his play style, it's hard for guys to play with him because he's ball dominant. He uses his speed and athleticism, a lot of isolation. He's not really an outside shooter. So it's not like, you know, when you have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George getting double teamed, you can just kick it out to John Wall for an open 3. You can't really do that because he's not really a good outside shooter. But I mean, on paper, if you can get John Wall, who's basically been sitting out for about a year and a half right now, he'll definitely be healthy. Hopefully he doesn't come down with any kind of injury. But to have him on that roster with Reggie Jackson as well, you have Zubac still as your center. I think the Clippers team are going to be better than where they were, you know, getting into the play-in and then falling out of that race from the Pelicans. But I like the potential of John Wall on that team, but just as long as he isn't, you know, so dominant in the kind of player that he is, if he can learn to be a complementary piece for Leonard and George, I think then they're going to be a good team. It's a matter of how John Wall is going to play. How is he going to play? So I think the Clippers, in the short time of free agency, I think they're one of the winners who made some of the best moves out there. I also like Philly, what they did in free agency. I mean, they still haven't signed James Harden, but all signs are going to point that he will be back for that team. But for the numbers that we're hearing, I mean, we're hearing that he's going to take less than the max extension. I mean, I think I talked about it last week, barely, but it's like he's finally seen the lights and said, you know, maybe my prime is behind me and I want to do whatever I can to try and get a ring. And, I mentioned it when he was first traded to Brooklyn, was that he had to make some kind of sacrifice in order for the Nets to be contenders. And he did that by limiting his scoring and being more of a passer. Now he's doing it from a financial side of things, saying, oh, if I sign this max deal, we're not going to have the room to sign PJ Tucker or players like that. So I respect James Harden for making that kind of commitment and saying, okay, I'm going to take less money so we can win. But, you got some of his old teammates from Houston out there, Daniel House, PJ Tucker. I think this is, when you have a guy like Joel Embiid who can be physically present down low and in the paint, I think you've got more toughness in PJ Tucker, more toughness in Daniel House Jr. And then you bring back James Harden, who hopefully is going to get a better sense of his role. And, he's not going to be the 30-point a game scorer that everyone thought he could be. But you pair him with Maxey in the backcourt, I think Philly can turn things around. Now, am I going to say that they're a top team right now over the Celtics or the Bucks? No, but they are probably a top 3 contender for me right now with some of the moves that they have made. So I like the Clippers and the Sixers for their kind of moves. And that's pretty much all there is, because just the moves have been so quiet. But the good news is it's only a week into free agency. There's still tons of names out there on the market, and I can't wait to see what these rosters look like once training camp gets underway. NBA offseason. As I said, it's quiet because there's not a lot of player movement going on right now, but we've got a lot of big name players who have re-signed for some big time money. So I just want to dive into who's signed or re-signed these lucrative extensions and deals and figure out, who's sort of in the best position. And I think the first one you have to talk about is the reigning 2-time MVP, the Joker, signing a supermax extension with the Nuggets of 5 years and $264 million. I mean, when you've won back-to-back MVPs, it makes sense why you would get this kind of money. In terms of the situation that Jokic is in, he's getting Michael Porter Jr. back. He's getting Jamal Murray back. He's still got Aaron Gordon on that roster. This was a team that was killed with injuries last year. And then they just made the move last week before free agency. You gave up Will Barton and Monte Morris. You bring back KCP and Ish Smith. That's a little bit more scoring coming off of your bench, which I think is very, very crucial. Now, I don't think Denver really makes a big move elsewhere because, I mean, you look at the past couple of seasons, they were in the Western Conference Finals in the bubble. Then they went out in the second round, I want to say. And then last year, they were a first-round exit to the eventual champs. And they just looked totally overmatched. But if you can find weapons outside of the Joker and give them some weapons on offense, I think then Denver is right back to where they are as contenders. Maybe they become a top 5 team once again instead of faltering back to number 6. But as I said, you're getting healthy pieces back in Murray and Porter. Hopefully you bring some key pieces. And then in free agency, some of the names include DeAndre Jordan as your backup center. Um, I think Denver can get back to where they are, but in terms of the next 5 years or so, I don't know if Jokic is going to be that committed to the Nuggets if they just continue to be a middle of the pack Western Conference team. Because let's be honest, the West is loaded, and it is stacked. So it's gonna take a monumental move by Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets to really, get him an opportunity to sign that ring. They're still going to be a playoff team, but in terms of making a big time move, I don't see it. I don't see it with Denver. And the same thing could be said for Bradley Beal. Re-signing with the Wizards, 5 years, 251 mil. I get the loyalty kind of thing for Bradley Beal, and I get that the money is out there. If you're going to take it, I mean, he's definitely going to get less if he signed anywhere else. But again, the Wizards aren't really going anywhere. They're the team. They're the team that made the trade with the Nuggets, and I like Bradley Beal as a player. He's a great number 2 option. He's just, I don't know if he can be that leader or that number 1 guy, because we have not seen it with the Wizards. I mean, you look at what happened the past couple of years. They became an 8th seed, and then they completely missed the playoffs. They didn't even make the play-in. So I can't tell you that the Wizards are, because Bradley Beal signed this deal, they're going straight to the top. They haven't really made any moves in this free agency period to help Bradley Beal. So I sort of get the commitment and the money side of things, again, similar to Jokic and his deal, but he's not going anywhere. The Wizards aren't going anywhere. And I don't think he can be that number 1 guy. It's the Wizards again. They should have known when they signed John Wall to that big deal. All of a sudden he gets hurt, and now you're stuck with that contract, and you were basically counting your stars that you were able to get him to the Houston Rockets and trade him. You might be in the same exact scenario if Bradley Beal and the Wizards don't go anywhere in the Eastern Conference. Because let's be honest, the East is just getting better and better with all the teams you're seeing making moves. And the Wizards, what have they done? They've signed their guy. They've signed the guy who they think is the closest thing to a championship. So I don't see the Wizards making a move either. I don't see them, taking a big step forward with this signing of Bradley Beal. And the situation, I just think, is only going to get worse and worse for the Wizards if they don't, get close to making the playoffs. But sticking to teams that made the playoffs, how about Zach LaVine? I think everyone saw this coming. He stuck with the Bulls, 5 years, 215, I should say, $1 million. And honestly, he earned it. He earned it. This is a guy who I believe is the prototypical example of improving year after year after year. You had him in Minnesota paired up with Wiggins and Towns, and then you give him, he was a part of that Jimmy Butler trade. Now you give him an opportunity to grow as a number 1 guy in Chicago, and look at what he's done. He's had the best years of his career, and the Bulls made the playoffs, and people were actually talking about them for a long, long time because they were sitting on top of the Eastern Conference for a little bit until injuries just really killed them. And I think that was the big thing for Chicago, was that they were just killed with injuries. I mean, LaVine was hurt for a time. Obviously, you didn't have Lonzo Ball. You didn't have Caruso. But look at what the Bulls have done in this offseason. Andre Drummond's your backup center. You bring back Derrick Jones Jr., bringing that athleticism. I like what Chicago has done. And I think they're going to be a really good team this year. And I think having LaVine is so vital in that, because you've basically got a 2-headed scoring monster, as I've said. Anytime we talk about the Bulls on this podcast, you got DeRozan, you got LaVine, you've hopefully got Lonzo Ball, who's a great passer. And then you bring on all those guys that I just mentioned. I like LaVine being committed to Chicago. And I think if Chicago does get back to contender status and possibly championship status, then this is the guy to do it, Zach LaVine. So I think he has the best situation going on right now. And that's hard to say with Devin Booker signing his extension too, 4 years, $224 million. And obviously Phoenix was in the finals a year ago. But considering the state that Phoenix is in, there's still questions about DeAndre Ayton. Is he going to re-sign? And you lost some names like JaVale McGee. We're hearing about reports with the Brooklyn trade. Even if you don't give up Devin Booker, even if Booker isn't involved in a trade, you still might have some vital pieces for the future, like Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson have to be included in that. Do you really want to take that chance? And I think for Phoenix, as I said, the West is just only getting better. The teams I just mentioned, the Warriors, the Grizzlies, the Clippers, just to name a few teams. It's hard to say that Phoenix is going to stay on top of the mountaintop. But if they are going to do it, it's got to be with Devin Booker. So I think he's probably in the second best situation because Phoenix is still a contending team with him and Paul. But it depends greatly on if the Suns can hold on to DeAndre Ayton. I think that's absolutely huge for Phoenix development. And then we go into some players who signed their designated rookie extensions, and they got a ton of money. Let's start with Ja Morant, the most improved player. 4 years, $226 million. I mean, come on. After last year, it would be a shocker that he did not get a max extension. And the Grizzlies are a team that are on the rise. And you just give them a little bit of experience. Look at that series with Golden State. They kind of were maturing as the season went on. And when they got into that series, they just had, it was a team who had little experience to a team with a lot of experience in Golden State. And you just saw it play out. And then obviously Morant got hurt with that injury. But the more time passes, the more comfortable that Memphis is going to be. And obviously Ja Morant is basically the superstar on the rise. He's going to be one of those names that dominates the game, hopefully for the next 10 years of the league. When you get LeBron, who's going to retire, Durant's going to retire, Curry's going to retire. You hope this new age, includes Giannis, Ja Morant, Booker, just to name a few guys. But you hope that Ja Morant is at the forefront just because his athleticism is out of this world, absolutely out of this world. So I'm very happy to see Morant get the kind of money that he's going to make. And same thing with Darius Garland too. He was the part of a rising Cleveland team. And now Cleveland is finally being taken seriously again. And they don't need LeBron James to do that. So Darius Garland, again, is at the forefront of this rise for the Cavs. So it makes sense why he's getting 5 years and possible incentives that total up to $231 million. But the one name that I think has everyone scratching their heads in this kind of deal is Zion Williamson, 5 years. Again, so basically the same contract as Darius Garland, 5 years. Total is just under 200 million guaranteed. The incentives could go up to 231. It's interesting why New Orleans decided to give him this kind of deal, considering all the injury problems that he had. He missed, I think he's missed more games than he's played in. And obviously last year you had the broken foot. He couldn't play. And then the videos came out. Oh, he seems fine, but New Orleans isn't going to clear him. Stuff like that. It does show me what New Orleans is going for in their future with a big three of CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, and Zion. But this contract is all based on potential for Zion. If he can stay healthy, what kind of guy are you getting? You're getting a freak athlete. And you've got a great future in New Orleans. So that's what this is all going on for New Orleans. And obviously, I think they might be out of the running now for Kevin Durant, possibly, unless you put Brandon Ingram possibly in there. But I think this just shows me for New Orleans that they are committed to Zion. They think that they have mended fences, and you heard it in the press conference for Zion because it was actually his birthday, his 22nd birthday, and he said he wants to bring a championship to New Orleans. He's committed to being with the Pelicans organization, so it kind of makes sense why he's saying all that stuff. But again, it's all potential. Can he stay healthy? Can he stay on the court? Because you got to remember, this Pelicans team minus Zion gave Phoenix some fits in that first round, and they took them all the way to 6 games. I think this is a team where if you've got everyone on the same page, if you've got the exact same team that you put out there, along with a healthy Zion who has that potential that everyone hypes him up to be, then this is a team that can make some noise in a rising Western Conference. But with all the money being shelled out by these teams for these superstar players, which one's going to benefit the best? Only time will tell. There is so much more we got to get into, so let's go to our usual segment around this time of the show. It is time for Quick Hits. And we start with the big trade in the NFL that happened just yesterday. Baker Mayfield is finally gone from Cleveland, traded from the Browns to the Carolina Panthers for a conditional 5th-round pick. And let me first start by saying hallelujah that Baker is finally gone from that rat hole situation that is the Cleveland Browns. That means the Browns are probably going to be going with Jacoby Brissett to start the season. I mean, come on. And considering, I said it from the minute Deshaun Watson was traded to Cleveland and signed that big deal. Baker Mayfield has been the most disrespected athlete in recent history. Considering the way that Cleveland publicly trashed him and basically said, we need toughness. We need a guy who's not named Baker Mayfield. Baker finally took a swing back, and finally he's gone. And Cleveland figured out that, we're not going to get a massive haul for a guy that we publicly ripped for not being our guy. I mean, that's just Cleveland shooting themselves in the foot. So I can't wait to see the Browns falter when Deshaun Watson gets suspended. But let's talk about the team that Baker's on right now, Carolina Panthers. You got him, you got Sam Darnold, you got Matt Corral. Why are you having 3 guys that you think could be your quarterbacks? Are you just opening up all options out there saying, let's just throw a dart at one of these 3 and they're going to be the ones? But reports from Adam Schefter of ESPN is saying that there's going to be a competition between Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold. Why is there a need to be a competition? You saw what Baker Mayfield could do when he's healthy, okay? Last year, he was hurt basically from top to bottom. Basically, all 206 of his bones were broken. I mean, he had a bad shoulder, he had a bad knee, and him being shaken up is still better than a healthy Sam Darnold. Look at what Sam Darnold did for the Panthers last year. It got so bad to the point you brought Cam Newton back, okay? Panthers, this doesn't have to be a competition. Baker Mayfield is your quarterback, all right? We've seen when healthy, he can take a team to the playoffs. He's been the best Browns quarterback for the last 20 years because he actually won a playoff game. So I don't know what Carolina is thinking. It was obvious it was either them or Seattle as a destination for Baker Mayfield. But in terms of what you're going to do now that he's on your roster, just give him the damn start, okay? You don't need a competition. Baker has shown in his first couple of years that he is a capable starting cornerback. Over to tennis now with the Wimbledon, and the men's draw has been just as exciting. Recently in the quarters, you had Novak Djokovic and Rafa Nadal both rally from 2 sets down to advance. But, for Nadal, it was worst case scenario as he had to withdraw from his semi matchup against Nick Kyrgios. He suffered an abdominal injury, I should say. And he's not going to play in his semifinal matchup, which is just sad because Nadal watching that matchup in the quarters, just the way he was able to rally. I mean, you could tell that he was hurt and he gave it his all. And considering the implications too, I mean, we were looking at possibly a calendar Grand Slam out there if he won this, and then the U.S. Open that Djokovic isn't going to play. So it's just sad. And Nadal, it just looked like in the second half of his career, had like a second wind, essentially. Like all the pain was gone. You know, he was dominating, or I shouldn't say dominating, but he was succeeding on grass, which is arguably his worst surface to play on. So I'll say it again, that it's just sad that Nadal has to withdraw from the semis, but that just opens the door for Djokovic to possibly catch Rafa Nadal in terms of career majors. But I mean, Djokovic did the exact same thing, rallying from 2 sets down, coming back. Nick Kyrgios, regardless of who he's going to play, is going to have his hands full in the men's final for Wimbledon. Shifting to basketball, where we go to the women's side, and I want to highlight Sabrina Ionescu, because she's already becoming a household name in the WA, former #1 overall pick. Last night, or a few nights ago, I should say, put in a 31-point triple-double. You know how many players in WNBA history have had 30-point triple-doubles? None. You know who's the career leader now in triple-doubles? Candace Parker and Sabrina Ionescu. I mean, granted, it's only like 2 or 3 triple-doubles, but still, I mean, Candace Parker is one of the top players in women's history who's still playing right now. And you got to keep in mind, Ionescu is making these moves, and it's only her 3rd season with the New York Liberty, okay? She's only 3 years into her WNBA career, and she's already putting up ridiculous numbers right now, okay? Everyone, I mean, the hype when she was at Oregon was completely justified. I mean, she had the NCAA record for triple doubles. I think the number was like 26 while she was at Oregon. I think the only thing that certifies her right now into being a Hall of Famer is getting a championship. And it's hard to say that the Liberty are going to do it, because there's a bunch of great teams out there. The Aces have been dominant with Asia Wilson so far in the season. You've got Seattle obviously out there, the reigning champs, Chicago, the Chicago Sky with the aforementioned Candace Parker. So, you know, I can't say that Ionescu's getting a ring right away, but the path that she's on right now being tied with most career triple doubles, she's on her way to being a Hall of Famer, and she's only in the middle of her 3rd season. To baseball, we got to go back to Showtime. Shohei Ohtani is on a phenomenal roll right now for the Angels. You want to listen to this number, because this was absolutely crazy when I read it. Shohei Ohtani has not allowed an earned run in 28 2/3 innings in his last 4 starts. That means his last 4 starts, 0 earned runs, okay? This is a little over 3 full games that he has not allowed an earned run. This dude is amazing, absolutely amazing. You can see, you know, similar to what I just mentioned with Ionescu, the hype is justified for Shohei Ohtani. But here's the problem. It's not just Shohei Ohtani on the LA Angels right now, because if it was a 25-man roster of all Shoheis, then this team would be the best in baseball right now. But they've lost 4 of their last 5 games. They're 38-45. I mean, the good news is that they're winning when Shohei starts. So far, they're 4-0 in these last 4 starts that Ohtani has pitched. But they can't win with anyone else on the mound right now. So that's the problem that the Angels face. And it's sad that you've got players like Ohtani and Mike Trout on your roster, but you can't even sniff the playoffs right now. You had a good month, and then you lost 14 straight, and now you're on the outside looking in of the wild card. Because good luck chasing down the Rays, the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, the Guardians. Good luck chasing them down. But, I mean, let's just appreciate what we've got in Shohei Ohtani, because this is a once-in-a-generational talent in the MLB. And lastly, I want to go to hockey and sort of end this on a positive note because there's some good kind of history being made in hockey with the first black general manager in the NHL. It's former player Mike Grier becoming the new general manager of the San Jose Sharks. And that is just a feel good right there. We're starting to see barriers just continue to be broken down in the sports world. If there's anything that can instill change, because let's be honest, nothing can really set us forward instead of setting us back. It's sports that are really doing it. You've got women and African Americans, black people who are finally getting their opportunity. You got Grier becoming a general manager. Women are finally at the forefront rather than just in the back seat. But on a talent perspective for Mike Grier, I think he's a guy that can turn around the San Jose Sharks. Of course, he played with the Sharks. So he knows exactly what the team is looking for, what the fan base is sort of expecting from that. And maybe he can turn things around because it's been a while since we've seen the Sharks in the playoffs and really be strong contenders. So is Grier the guy? Only time will tell, but I'm very happy that Mike Grier is getting the opportunity to be this general manager and to put his name in the history books of the NHL. And that is a wrap of this week's edition of Quick Hits. It is time for our usual segment, our Let's Get Local, as we've got two teams we're going to be talking about. But before we go deep into them, let's talk about the newest hire for the Boston Bruins. Jim Montgomery was signed, or was chosen, I should say, by Don Sweeney and Cam Neely to be the new head coach, replacing Bruce Cassidy. Now, I didn't know a lot about Montgomery when he was first hired, so I got to read up a little bit on him. And obviously, he had the head coaching gig with the Dallas Stars. Recently, was an assistant with the St. Louis Blues. But what was interesting was that, obviously, for those that don't know, was that he entered a rehab facility for alcohol addiction, which was why he was fired from his gig with the Dallas Stars. So, you know, I like the story, sort of this sort of comeback kind of thing of, I've come back a better person. And, you know, if he wants to be upfront about his situation, you know, I'm going to respect whatever he wants to do with sort of addressing this kind of thing. But in terms of the hire, you know, I just think some kind of change was expected. I mean, you're seeing it with Jake DeBrusk rescinding his trade request, with possible reports of David Krejci maybe returning to the Bruins. You know, it just says that, you know, that a head coaching change was needed. It was something about Bruce Cassidy. So I think the Bruins is something to watch for over the summer, now that you've got a new guy at head coach. And maybe, you know, that makes Bergeron excited that he wants to re-sign with the Bruins. And obviously the team is going to be missing a lot of people to start the year, with McAvoy, Grzelcyk, Marchand, obviously, with injuries. But I'm very curious to see what Jim Montgomery does with the kind of roster that he has, because he did turn around the Dallas Stars when he was first hired. They missed the playoffs, and then boom, they're right back into the playoffs. So we'll see. We will see what happens with the newest head coach for the Boston Bruins. But let's get from off the ice to on the field and talk about the Red Sox. And they continue to show why it's so hard to buy in when things are going so well. You remember back in May and the first part of June, you know, this team was rolling, absolutely rolling. They had a 20-6 record in the month of June, but it was that last series in that month that made them tumble right back to where they were in April and in May. And that is 3-6 in the last 9 games. Now, I will say there's a lot of things to attribute it to. I think part of it is injuries. Obviously, Michael Wacha is dealing with a dead arm. Rich Hill said he felt something pop in his last start, I believe against the Cubs. Nathan Eovaldi still isn't close to rehabbing. Garrett Whitlock's still out there. Chris Sale might be rejoining the team, so that could help a little bit. But I mean, injuries have been killing the pitching staff right now. I mean, really, your best starter out there is Nick Pivetta. Thank goodness he hasn't been hurt. Knock on wood, really quickly. But you're just seeing guys from AAA who are young and inexperienced, like Brian Bayo, who made his MLB debut. You know, he was a highly touted prospect, but he probably wouldn't have made a start if Rich Hill wasn't hurt or if Michael Walker wasn't hurt. Now, Bayo wasn't great, but there's no need to panic because we have seen guys come up from Worcester, from AAA, and after that first start have sort of settled down. Big name, Josh Winkowski. Another name, Connor Siebold. Those guys settled down after their first start. They didn't look fantastic, but when they got more comfortable with being a major league starting pitcher, he started to get more comfortable. So I still have hope for Bayo. I think the comparison to Pedro Martinez is a little crazy right now. I mean, you could see the potential in the start last night against the Rays. He had a good fastball that was at 98. He had a sinker that was moving a little bit, but he's got to develop some more pitches and get them going on a consistent basis. So, I mean, I'm going to hold out faith for Bayo. You know, maybe he becomes a bullpen guy at the end of the year if he starts to really settle in. But let's get back to why this team is struggling the way they are. I think the lineup is back to their early season problems. I mean, in the last 9 games, as I said, they're 3-6, and they've only scored more than 6 runs one time. Okay, and that was in a victory. They had to come back in that one, I think, the extra inning game in Toronto. And then they've scored, I think, 5 runs twice. And then other than that, it's just been less than that. So the middle of the lineup, their power is gone. And part of it, you know, I will say part of it was Rafi Devers sat out most of the Rays series dealing with some back soreness. But Bogarts isn't really showing consistent power. JD Martinez doesn't have as consistent power. Trevor Story continues to be an inconsistent part of the lineup. And meanwhile, you've got guys like Cordero and Dahlbeck and Arroyo who, when, you know, they benefit off of these power hitters. So they're not getting on base. And the Sox just continue to leave runners in scoring position when they do get on base. So the lineup just continues to absolutely kill them. I mean, the only bright spot at the moment right now is Jarren Duran. You know, you might have found your leadoff guy for the future, and all because he's subbing in for Kike. The way he's been able to hit the ball and, you know, be a huge factor on the bases, his base running and his speed have been tremendous to see for the Sox. But that's really the only bright spot you have in this lineup. You're not getting any consistent power from your big bats. And if that doesn't change, you're going to go right back to the bottom of the heap where you were in April and in May. And that is multiple games under 500. But you had a good month of June. So you got to really hope that you can just at least play 500 baseball with the lineup that you have. But you can't play 500 baseball with the bullpen that you have, because let's be honest, I think that the Sox have the best collection of starters. I think they have one of the better starting rotations in the MLB. But the problem is, once you're done with the starters, you got to go to the bullpen. And once again, you know, I said this basically before the beginning of last season, was that the bullpen is the biggest glaring issue. And of course, the conversation, you know, not just for me, but all around Boston and WEEI, is that Chaim Bloom sees this and is not doing anything about it. You know, he went into this year on potential that Matt Barnes can turn it around, that Jake Diekman can be a middle inning guy, a high leverage guy, that Sawamura can turn things around. First off, Sawamura is done. If you give up 4 walks in a 3-out in a 1-inning outing, you're done. You shouldn't even be a part of this roster. Okay. Matt Barnes is still hurt. Diekman, you can't put him in anything. Danish, you can't put him in anything. There's only 4 names right now in terms of relievers that are like committed to the bullpen that I trust right now. And that is Schreiber, Houck, Austin Davis, and Matt Strom. I'll even throw Whitlock in there because he's going to get back into the bullpen once he's back from injury. But it continues to be a glaring issue. I mean, Bloom is a guy who got Hansel Robles at the deadline. Where is Robles right now? He just got designated for assignment, okay? That's the big reliever you're going to get in free agency. Come on, Chaim Bloom. I mean, you've made some great moves, picking up Kike Hernandez, making a bunch of trades to get Nick Pivetta, and just a couple of names to name a few. Getting Ref Snyder on a minor league deal, and building the farm system. He's done a good job of that. But how about the immediate issue of right here and now? He hasn't done anything about it, and that's what's frustrating. Is that this is a team that can be good, but the front office is doing nothing about it. So I look at Chaim Bloom and I look at the deadline and I say, if you don't make a move to get a big time reliever, then you've got fans of the Red Sox coming at your throat. And you're going to see how far behind you are when you've got the Yankees coming into town. And not only that, but you're playing the Yankees twice in the next 3 series before you go into the All-Star break. Right in the middle is a series in Tampa at Tropicana against the Rays. So hopefully this series with New York is an eye-opener for Chaim Bloom, saying, maybe this team is good. We just need a few pieces here and there, because he's going on potential. He's going on these players turning things around. But reality is finally setting in that they will not turn things around, and they're just going to continue to stink. You've got your guys in the bullpen. Those guys I just mentioned, those are your core. That's your foundation. But where's everyone else? Where is everyone else? I don't know. So he's not going all in, but there is one guy that is going all in the city of Boston. That is Brad Stevens. He has made quite some moves in his second off season. I mean, I'll build up what Brad Stevens has done since he became president of basketball operations. Basically took over for Danny Ainge. Brought back Al Horford. He brought in Derek White in a trade. He brought back Daniel Tice in a trade. He signs Danilo Gallinari, and he trades for Malcolm Brogdon. I mean, talk about Brad Stevens not being afraid to go after the big fish. I mean, let's start with Gallinari signing a 2-year deal. I think it's a great need move because you need scoring off the bench, and Gallo is a scorer. I mean, he's got some size. He's a shot maker. He's a playmaker. In terms of he can give you those catch and shoots when you've got Tatum and Brown being double teamed. And he's a shooter. He's a shooter, and you needed scoring off the bench. And he is your guy. He's going to be your guy for the second unit for sure. But let's talk about that trade. Malcolm Brogdon from the Indiana Pacers. The package has Tice, Neesmith, Fitz, Stauskas, Morgan, and a 2023 first rounder. That's it to get Malcolm Brogdon. I was very surprised at the amounts or lack thereof that it took to get Malcolm Brogdon. And what kind of player is Brogdon? He's a two-way playmaker that can hit open shots. I mean, let's just put it at it like that. He's a playmaker. What did you need? Playmaking. The most glaring issue when you were in the NBA Finals against the Warriors was you didn't have a point guard that could play make, with no disrespect to Marcus Smart or Derek White. They just couldn't hit shots. And they weren't the facilitator that everyone was expecting them to be. And Brogdon is that guy. Now, the questions are about his health. He's got to stay healthy in order to have these kind of performances. And if Brogdon doesn't stay healthy, then you're kind of screwed. But you're going on potential that he is healthy, because when he is healthy, he's a great player. A great player that I think is going to I think for right now, after that trade, the Celtics have to be the favorites in the East, at least top two with them in Milwaukee. I think those are the two teams right now. And after this trade, everyone's saying, oh, where does that leave Marcus Smart? Where does that leave Derek White or Peyton Pritchard? I think all of them can play together. I think Smart, he's not, everyone's saying he's not a true point guard, and that's true. But if you're talking like late in games, you can have Brogdon as your point guard, and then you could put Marcus Smart as your two guard. I think that's the case that Ime Udoka could do with this roster. I really do think so. I think these two can play together because I said it last week. You don't trade Marcus Smart because you can't replace that kind of physicality and defense for a reigning defensive player of the year. I know he struggles offensively from time to time. He's still a little bit inconsistent, but you would rather have Smart on your roster than off your roster. So great moves by Brad Stevens. I do think there is one more move to be made. Obviously, you still have the 17 million TPE out there right now. So that's up until July 17th. So there's still 10 days to make that move. But there are still some names out there on the market that I think the Celtics can do, because I still think they need a big man backing up Robert Williams. And one name I looked at really quickly was Dwight Howard. I know he's a guy that's kind of ring chasing right now. He'd be on veteran minimum deals. And he's basically the same guy as Robert Williams. He can give you some scoring on some alley-oops. He's a good defender. So I think Dwight Howard could be a guy that the Celtics look at for a backup to Robert Williams. That's just a name that's out there. Not 100% sure who else is out there in terms of centers that can back up Robert Williams, because basically you're kind of looking for a guy that could be your starter if Williams continues to have his injury problems. And the first name that just popped into my head was Dwight Howard. So that might be a name out there. Maybe, I think things are going to pick up once Summer League gets underway, because then all the executives are going to be basically in one spot, and they're going to have a lot more communications. And then obviously free agents are going to really make their decision the closer the season gets on. But I'm very excited for what the Celtics have done. And I'm very excited for the Red Sox as we hit the summer months, as we get into July. Hopefully they can turn things around and Boston can get that much closer to getting another trophy. Lastly, as we always do, we look at our LOL moment of the week, and we are going back to the holiday, to the 4th of July, for a time-honored tradition. And honestly, it's still a serious story. It's obviously a big accomplishment that happened on the 4th of July, but it's still just kind of funny to sort of treat it like another sport, I guess, out there. So this week's LOL moment of the week goes to Joey Chestnut, the greatest competitive eater, I guess, in the entire world. So what does he do on the 4th of July? He goes out on crutches, on a broken foot, and gets his 15th career Nathan's hot dog eating contest victory by downing 63 hot dogs. But I think the LOL moment is when the protester comes out. He basically sort of nudges his way right in front of Joey Chestnut. And while he's eating, Chestnut puts him in a headlock and basically throws him to the ground, all while he's eating. That's hilarious to me. And obviously you didn't see it on TV as it happened, but it's all going around there on Twitter. Seeing this guy, or this kid, basically, it's a 21-year-old they released. He's in a Vader mask, and he had a sign or something like that. I'm not sure exactly, what it was he was protesting, but Chestnut, while he's downing these dogs, basically turns and is like, get out of here. And he just goes right back to eating. And he still put in a huge margin of victory. I don't know. The next guy probably had like 40 or something like that. I'm not 100% sure, but I think this might be Chestnut's best performance ever in the hot dog eating contest, because not only did you down 63 dogs, which granted is nowhere close to his record of like 74, but he was on crutches. He dealt with a protester, and then he just went right back to it. So, I mean, props to Chestnut, but I think the LOL moment itself is when the protester came out. Chestnut basically shoves him aside and gets right back to dominating the competition. But it's still fascinating how people like the kind of energy that they have for competitive eating. Like on the 4th of July, I remember putting out a poll a couple of years ago asking if people like enjoy it, because you've got one side of the fence where we're like, oh, this is great, this is entertaining. And the other half we're like, that is nasty, because I mean, the strategy is to separate the dogs from the buns, and you're putting the buns in the water and you're kind of shoving them in. So the way it looks is just like completely nasty, and it makes you want to throw up. So, I'm still like right in the middle of like, yeah, it's entertaining, but it's also kind of disgusting as well to watch on TV. So Joey Chestnut for once again dominating the Nathan's hot dog eating contest in a unique way, which included getting rid of a protester while you were downing your dogs. You've earned yourself into this week's LOL moment of the week. So that is going to wrap it up for this edition of Let Me Speak. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in wherever you're getting this podcast, listening on Spotify or Apple, or watching us on YouTube. Make sure, as always, you're following our other pages on social media. That's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. All you got to do is search Let Me Speak Podcast. And remember, as always, if you got a point you got to get across, just let the whole world know. Shut up and let me speak.